For me, soundbars can always be a little bit awkward to review at first, and I think that's because I've got in my living room a pretty decent 5.1 surround sound system that does actually sound pretty good, and the 5.1 surround sound is real and genuine. I've got 5 speakers set up around the room, and you can really tell where the sound's actually coming from, whether it's gunfire coming from behind you, you can tell it's coming from way over there, or if a helicopter is flying over your head, you can tell that a helicopter is coming from behind you to the front of the screen. But the annoying thing about most surround sound systems is the cabling. Now there are meters and meters of cabling running around the outside and around the side skirts of my actual living room, but not everyone really wants that, especially if there's no way of hiding them very well in the room. So that's where soundbars really do come in. And that's why Samsung sent us through the HW-MS650 Soundbar. So setup for the Samsung MS650 is absolutely simple, and all it requires is a power cable that runs into the actual box, and then an optic cable that you can run from here straight into the television, so that anything plugged into the television will then override the sound straight out of the soundbar. Now you can plug optical cables from individual items like the Xbox One, PS4 or a Virgin or Skybox. They've got optical ports on the back of them that can go straight into the back of this, but if you do plug it into your telly with your optical out on your telly, then this will override any sound that comes through the telly, ultimately making the sound better than the sound that comes out of any television anyway. You can use HDMI as an ARC, and there is an ARC pass-through on here as well, so you can plug your Xbox or your PS4 HDMI straight into the back of this and HDMI straight into the telly, and it has an ARC pass-through, so you can still get the picture on your telly and the sound coming out of the soundbar. The optical cable we've already spoken about, but there are a couple of wireless connections on here as well. The first is Bluetooth, which is very self-explanatory. You can hook your mobile phone up to it and play some songs that way. But there is also a wireless mode built into this as well, so it means you can hook up something like a NAS drive or a network hard drive, network storage, that kind of thing, to play music that way through the actual soundbar. And that was very, very easy to set up as well. It was very easy to detect this as a wireless unit on my network, to connect it up to a wireless speaker to Windows. And it just acted as if any other wireless speaker would. So if you're in Spotify, you can select which source you want to play through, whether it's this computer, this mobile, or a wireless speaker. It worked very, very easily, and its setup was an absolute cinch. One thing I also want to talk about power is the fact that there is a pass-through on here that can run to a television. Now that means if you've got a pass-through power cable, you can pass power from this into your TV, so you've only got one cable ultimately trailing from the soundbar that's mounted on the wall as well. There is an included wall mount bracket, but you've only got one cable mounted from this down to wherever your plug is. And then a pass-through cable comes out the back of this into your telly, so you've got one cable trailing down the wall, essentially, if you have got this thing mounted on the wall, which is extremely useful. If you haven't, and you've got a TV on a stand with this on that same stand, then you're not really going to probably use that pass-through functionality. It's really more for the wall mounters out there that will really, really benefit from that setup. There is also a wireless speaker system that you can buy for this, which you get a little receiver which plugs into the back of this, and then it can transmit signals to 2 speakers that you can then place behind you, ultimately turning this into kind of, I would say, a 3.0 sound system, maybe something like that, but it just adds a little bit of depth to the sound, and it gives you a surround sound kind of feeling. There is no subwoofer with this though, however, it is just this one unit that you have that you can see in front of you. Now the actual rear speakers will set you back around £380, which is a very, very expensive investment if you ask me, especially if you want that 5.1 surround sound system. You may as well just invest in a cheap entry-level surround sound system, 5.1 system anyway, if you're going to start spending an extra nearly £400 on a set of rear speakers. So I wouldn't really recommend going down that route if you are looking for that minimalist soundbar kind of experience. Now the biggest downfall at first, and I must say I did leave this plugged in for about a week, because coming from a 5.1 surround sound system, I would call it a downgrade to a soundbar. It's really difficult to want this and to see any kind of benefits of having this, but you've got to remember that if I was coming from a television system and I bought this as an additional upgrade to my television, then of course the sound is going to sound so much superior. But coming from a 5.1 down to a soundbar, it's really, really hard to recommend doing something like that, because the sound, you do lose that surround sound quality. Not so much if you're watching broadcasted TV, because broadcasted TV isn't broadcast in 5.1. Not all channels are anyway. Some movie channels will be. and maybe some sports channels, the specialist channels, things like that will probably come in 5.1, but your standard terrestrial channels will definitely not be broadcast in 5.1. So for that reason, you're not really getting any added benefit of having something like this over a surround sound system, but certainly for the movies and things like that, you are. So as I said, I was using this soundbar for about a week, watching various World Cup matches that were on the TV, watching a few movies from the Samsung Movie Lounge service that I'll go into a little bit more detail about later. And after the week, this is my experience with this, is when I first plugged it in and I came from my 5.1 system, I wasn't impressed, and I think that was because I was coming from my 5.1 system, but towards the end of the week, you kind of start forgetting what that 5.1 system sounded like, and you start getting used to the sound of the soundbar. Now, as I said, this will sound tenfold better over any television out there, especially now as televisions are so flat and they've got really tiny speakers inside them. They don't sound very good at all. This will sound 10 times better than any television out there, I guarantee it, except maybe the Bose telly. Oh, don't hold me to that. But you kind of start forgetting what your previous equipment sounded like. Certainly I forgot what my 5.1 system sounded like because I was so used to listening to this. And I must say, it did sound very, very good for what it was. Now, there are various different sound modes that you can set this to depending on what you're watching or depending on your personal preference. There is also something called Smart Mode, which detects the walls in the house and the ceilings and how far away you are and everything like that. And it really did make an improvement over all of the sound modes on here. Absolutely, hugely made an improvement. Sound modes consist of things like standard, cinema, sports, music, that kind of thing. So you can choose which one is your personal favourite. I personally left it on standard. Music and cinema kind of muted the sound of this, but I didn't turn it up on the remote control. So maybe if you turn it up louder on here, and then you can set this to movie. You've also got the bass control, which is on the remote here, which controls from -6 all the way up to +6, how powerful you want the actual bass to come through the actual soundbar. I set mine to +4 just because I liked a bit of bass. +6 made it a little bit too overpowering compared to the mids and the high tones. Depending on, that didn't matter on which sound mode I set it to, it was just a little bit overpowering, so I just kind of notched the bass and pulled that back a bit. So what I really want to do for you is give you some kind of demonstration on what the sound sounds like through this. I haven't got a movie set up in here, so I can't show you any kind of movie sounds, and also for copyright reasons I can't show any movies anyway. But I have got some music that I could play on my phone. I've hooked it up through Bluetooth already. You can see if I adjust things like the volume, you've got a little screen down on here which gives you a kind of simple readout on what kind of mode you are set on here. But it's a very, very simple screen. There's nothing flashy here. But this is just a little bit of music that I'm going to play. Some various genres of music I'm going to play through here just to give you an idea on what this soundbar actually sounds like. So that's the bass turned right up to the top, and the volume, it's got a bit of volume coming out of it, but it sounds quite nice actually. So you've got a little bit of punchy bass coming through the actual speaker, which sounds alright. It's not as heavy as having a subwoofer. It's nowhere near as loud as having a subwoofer, or nowhere near as clear as having a separate subwoofer, but you have got a little bit of bass there just to give it some kind of separation from that treble music as well, that treble tones. So on this track, you've actually got a punchy bass tone, a punchy bass line to this track, so you can hear that a lot better coming through the actual speakers than you could on the last one. Also, it's not just me, I think it actually sounds quite good. I know you're not going to get a true representation of that through the microphone that I've got in front, but you should get some idea of the kind of kick, especially with the bass that this speaker actually kicks out. So if there's one thing I did quickly want to mention, that's the size of the actual remote control and the simplicity of the remote control as well. There aren't many buttons really and menu systems to get lost in. Now if you actually do take a look at the remote control, you do have a power, settings, and also which source you want to choose from at the very top. There's a nice easy to control D-pad if you are changing certain settings on the actual TV as well using this remote control. You've got your volume and your bass rockers which push up and down when you are using the remote control to change those settings, and they just click. And they've got a really nice audible click as well, and it does feel very, very premium. The three buttons on the bottom here, surround, sound mode, and smart mode, as you can see on the three bottoms here. Smart mode triggers that on and off. Surround, well, it didn't actually work when I was using this because I think you actually need the rear speakers for it to work, so that was a bit of an issue when I was actually testing this. Didn't work because we didn't have the wireless speakers for the rear testing the soundbar. And sound mode changes between the standard, the music, cinema, sports, and all the various different sound modes on there. The remote control actually feels quite weighty and it feels very nice to hold in the hand, very much like the LG Magic remote control, although it's not gesture sensitive and it doesn't have a sensor that controls a mouse pointer on the TV, but it actually does have a very, very nice weight to it. And as I say, it feels like it's made from a very tough material. I wouldn't mind dropping this on the floor, albeit not that many times. The whole back does actually remove to reveal two AA batteries, so the remote control should last an actually quite a long time before having to change the batteries again. So as you're looking at the soundbar, on the right hand side you've got controls which are a plus and minus for volume. You've got a source which changes it from HDMI out to the digital output, and then you've also got power as well. So if you do lose your remote control, there's not really much to worry about because you can still technically use the soundbar from the buttons on the side. You just can't obviously sit back on your sofa and use it. You have to physically get up and press the buttons on the side. That is our review of the Samsung HW-MS650. It is a soundbar that sounds absolutely wonderful as long as you're a person that doesn't mind having the sound coming from one part of the room. It's by no means no replacement for a full 5.1, 7.1 surround sound system. There's no subwoofer either, so you lose out on that bass coming from a various position in the room. But for what it actually is, it sounds absolutely superb, and I couldn't really fault it on the sound. But just make sure you turn on that smart mode, because if not, then you get some really dull sounds coming out of this. The last thing I did want to speak to you about is something that's called Samsung Movie Lounge, which is basically a Samsung loot box that's filled with a DVD, and you've got various random selection of popcorn that you can try out and you can eat while watching those movies. You actually get that subscription service free if you buy this soundbar or any other select soundbars on Samsung's website. I'll leave full terms and conditions below. It also comes with Blu-ray players as well. So if you buy a Blu-ray player or a soundbar, then you get the Samsung Movie Lounge subscription box. But I say the popcorns were very strange. There was a cheese flavour, cookies and cream. There was a white chocolate flavour, toffee apple flavour. So there were some really, really weird flavours inside there. Some of them were nice, some of them weren't. The cheese flavoured popcorn wasn't that great, but I ended up giving that away. The other popcorns were really nice, but cheese, no. Do not like that one. The actual company that provides the popcorn is called Joseph's, or Joe and Seth's. I don't really know how they pronounce it. It looks like Joe and Seth's on the box, but it's called Joseph's. Capital J, capital S. Don't know why. And I've never heard of them before, but the popcorn's a really nice gourmet popcorn. Apparently they're a popcorn company, but they tasted really good. And as you get the subscription with this soundbar, then you get a free film as well. It's an Ultra 4K film. I got Thor Ragnarok in my first box. I'm not sure if that's... I've not seen anything on their website whether you get Thor Ragnarok every time or if it's just a random loot box. I don't know. The popcorn I'm hoping should be quite random. The movie I don't particularly want to see being random. If you are receiving these for 6 months or 12 months on a subscription plan, I would like to see the movies change. Especially if you end up with 7 copies of Thor Ragnarok. You don't want that. But you could sell it, I suppose, on eBay or somewhere else. But That will conclude my review of the Samsung HW-MS650 soundbar. If you did enjoy the review, then click that like button. Please do subscribe to keep up with all of our latest tech and gaming videos, and also let us know in the comments below what you think of soundbars, what you think of this soundbar, and whether you would invest in a soundbar for your setup, or whether you would go for a full 5.1 system, or you wall mount a telly and you think soundbars are a great idea for that, and you can see yourself having this underneath your brand new shiny Samsung TV. As I say, thank you very much for watching, and we will see you in the next video.